The Nigerian government has yet to recoup about 8 trillion naira in taxes withheld by international and local oil companies, global system of mobile telecommunication service operators, insurance companies, pension fund administrators, including gaming and betting companies, despite facing a financial crisis that has forced it to obtain sizable foreign loans. The Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit discovered the hidden funds not quite long, and investigations by the agency indicated that an approximate value-added taxation of 3.9 trillion naira and withholding tax of 3.7 trillion naira had also not been paid to the government's coffer, as well as other amounts hanging in foreign currencies. This report is believed to have been submitted to the National Assembly, detailing its activities and performance in 2021. The NFIU, however, said efforts to recover the revenues were ongoing. Financial expert and CEO Share Dynamic Solutions, Mr. Mukhtar Mohammed, is our guest at this particular time, and he is joining me to discuss and to understand the rationale why these companies are refusing to pay their tax. Thank you so much, Mr. Mukhtar, for joining us.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Now, tax evasion or the refusal to pay tax is an offense under the Company Income Tax Act and Companies Act. Now, is the issue with the fact that these oil companies are too big to be prosecuted, or there's some underlying factors as regards why these issues or cases are staying outside of the court for too long? I'd like you to just help us understand what the problem is.
I think the problem has nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with us as a nation if we are not going after collecting tax. And the same people that are finding it so difficult to collect tax from IOC are the same people that will harass local businesses to collect tax for them with all impunity. And whereas the OICs are allowed to do what they want and sometimes remit it to them. And it goes as far as some of them even getting tax rebate somehow through the presidency and then ordering the minister or the minister. So ordering the tax agency to give them tax rebate. And yet, from the report, you see Nigeria remitting tax to other countries, forcing them to pay those taxes to other countries. Why can't you force them to pay our own taxes here? So definitely, I think it has to do with maybe we sometimes, like I always say, corruption always have a role to play, because sometimes when these people get there, they are compromised one way or the other, and then they seem to be silent about it.
So, really, you're saying that there are some internal factors or saboteurs, as it were, making it hard for Nigeria to get its tax from these companies. But then, before you respond to that, I'd like you to look at the sum, because we're looking at the sum involved. We're talking about 3.7 trillion naira. Cumulatively 8 trillion naira. Now, looking at this particular amount, so why is it that this case stayed so hidden for so long, and why is it that it's just coming to light when this current administration is ending its tenure?
Well, maybe it's a pointer to the incoming administration to make sure they go after them. And again, when you look at that of about 6 trillion, how much is our budget deficit? So what these companies are owing us is enough to cover some of our budget deficits, if not all our budget deficits. And what it means is that we're not just yet serious and to get our revenue to widen our tax bracket. Because like I keep saying, the only time you see Nigerian companies or Nigerian tax organization thinking of widening the tax bracket to increase more burden on ordinary Nigerians, instead of them going after those that are tax evasion. If it's a Nigerian company now, they'll be taken to court. You see them do one or two things with them. Remember, I think of all of them, the telecommunication company, they had issue with MTN. For a while, they've been in court. They went to the tax tribunal. We are still waiting on judgment on that. I think it's been a year. They said they were going to settle out of court for the telecommunication side. For the insurance company, it's shocking that they still operate businesses here in Nigeria. They are still declaring profits. Some of them are still paying their shareholders dividend, and yet they are not paying taxes. And sometimes they remove this tax even from the dividend they are paying their shareholders, and government is not going after them. And again, when you talk about sabotage, sabotage is not really that because those people go out. It's just because we are not doing what we ought to do. We don't have the enabling environment. We don't create the system to make sure that things worked well. That's why we always have these challenges, and the government will come and call it sabotage. No, definitely it's not sabotage. It's you not doing what you ought to do. So for me, I think the way out is to create a system and make sure that this OIC pays their money at us when due, and then sanction them. They took MTN to court. MTN seems to be the only one they have taken to court. It just seems to look like the oil companies are always having a way to not be taken to court in one issues or the other. For me, that is my greatest worry.
But then, Mukhtar, you talked about Nigeria not having enabling environments, but then we have audit firms that are contracted. We have internal mechanisms. We are meant to have regulatory bodies that are meant to monitor the processes of tax collection and to deal with those or to take those who are evading these tax payments to court. So is the problem with the environment, or because I really do not understand when you say we don't have enabling environments, or is it that these pastors or agencies are not up and doing, or they do not even understand the mandate that is given to them?
You'll be surprised that if these are given to private hands, all this money will be recovered. If they give it to a private consultant now, you realize that all this money will be recovered, because the private consultant will go after them, knowing that of every tax that they are able to recover, they will also have profit. So they will go after them. And that's why sometimes you don't fault a state like Lagos State that internal generated revenue is being handled by private company. And that's why you see they are having the result they are having. So definitely, I think maybe we may have to begin to use that part. If you even look at it, we have done that even in our security of the pipeline. What we thought our Navy cannot do, we gave it to a former militant, and then we see oil theft disappeared. So definitely that means there's a problem with the system. On the reward system when it comes to taxes, maybe are not commensurate with those that are working directly with government, or seem to be commensurate with the private sector. Can I assure you, if we hand over this tax collection to private individuals, we'll recover this money in the shortest possible time. So that tells you that it's a system that is not working. So we need to work on that, or maybe we should begin to give out all these things to consultants, and then let those that works in the tax office should also begin to have incentive that if you recover such amount, you get such amount outside your salary. And then maybe that would be an innovative way of getting some of this tax back into the government coffer. Because sometimes in some states, when you go to the staff tribunal, or you go to some state, these standard people sometimes sit down with you and say, oh, you are owing X amount of this. Can you pay X amount of this, and we'll write off X amount of this? And it seems to be working. And so maybe the tax agency, the federal tax agency, need to learn a lot from some of the state agency, and also begin to look at the incentive for those that will bring this tax to them.
Now, according to reports, 20 GSM firms with an inflow of 58 trillion naira owed 580.3 billion naira, while 201 insurance firms with an inflow of 9.9 trillion naira are said to be indebted to the tune of about 99.9 billion naira. Now, looking at this now, do you think that these companies that are circumventing the payment of their tax to government with impunity can be sanctioned, can be dealt with without having an effect on their workers? Because we're talking about recouping taxes being paid, but then not having to affect the workers who work for these companies and avoiding job losses. So is there a way we can strike a balance in between that?
I'll come again. I didn't get your question.
All right, so I'm talking about companies that are indebted in terms of tax payment to the government, but are not paying, because you've talked about the fact that there should be litigation cases served to them for refusing to pay their taxes to government. But then there have been conversations around these companies being sanctioned and the workers for these companies losing their jobs. So is there a possibility whereby these companies can be sanctioned, money is gotten from them, and those working for them do not get to lose their jobs?
No, there's always the modality. There's always, when you have a tax invasion, ordinarily you should be sanctioned and you should be taken to the tribunal. There's a special tribunal for tax invasion. So it's, like I said, maybe the political will is not there, or like I told you initially earlier on, corruption might be playing a role. Because it's not like, I keep saying, Nigeria is not developed a system to doing things, but it's just that the systems are not strong enough to move without those people that are sitting there tell the system to move. Ordinarily, I don't need anything to take, if we are the tax agency, we don't need the presidential approval to take a certain company to court. But sometimes you hear that this company is taken to court and the presidency will say, we withdraw that case against them, where we try to settle it internally. We've had those cases. If you look at the MTN case, it dragged on for long until the presidency intervened, the Minister of Communication intervened, the Attorney General of the Federation, they now sat down and came to a compromise. So the fact we have is that we don't allow our systems to work because most of our systems are built by the man that is there. If you have a man that is strong and ready for the system to work, then it will work. But if you have individuals that are there and also looking at their own what and they will benefit from the system, it doesn't work. But ordinarily, it shouldn't be an issue. If somebody evade tax, you clamp down on them, they have their businesses here in Nigeria, they remit profits to banks. You see them sometimes when they want to go after individual. They are so fast as doing it. They close your account. BBN have made it easier for them to know all your account. They close it up and they go after you and make sure that you pay those taxes the last go. So why can't you do that also to the OIC? I think it's just boiled down to not ready to do the work.
So now that you called for the possibility of contracting a foreign firm to audit the tax accounts and see how these monies can be gotten, would you also advocate or canvass for the overhauling of the country's, the total overhauling of the country's tax system?
I think you should give it to this current administration in terms of tax. I think they've been able to do better than previous administration. Overhauling the tax system, definitely a tax system in any country is being reviewed based on circumstances. Sometimes when you look at sometimes you say some companies who should be having tax bracket by the challenges they are going into. So there's no one's definite way of handling, making rigid with your tax system. You need to evolve with time. Sometimes some companies are invited in the country. They will have not to pay tax over some time, but they create a lot of employment. They give them tax holiday for some time. So a lot of this happens. So it's not something that is just have to be rigid. But then the processes in terms of dealing with defaulters are always streamlined. If you default here, then you have this and you have this. It's not whether you give it to a private hand or you give it to a foreign hand. But the difference between a foreign arm or giving it to a private arm than letting government is that because of what will come to them as a company, if they collect this tax, they tend to do the job better than the government and their staff will feel that, look, whether you work or work, their salary will be paid at the end of the month. So the challenge is the attitudes towards going after those that have to remit this tax. And also, like I said, corruption is the biggest issues when it comes to remitting of tax when individuals are caught or companies are caught.
All right. Well, we understand. Of course, we're sure that a new administration will be coming in, hopefully by May 29. So we're going to see what they can do differently to see how they can put their foot down and be staunch in terms of recovering these taxes that are hanging over the air with these international companies. But then, thank you so much, Mukhtar, for joining us.
My pleasure.